Day 24. A heartbreaking development in the Nancy Guthrie case. After more than a week of silence, Savannah Guthrie posted an emotional video this morning, and what she said has left everyone devastated. The family is offering up to $1 million for information leading to the recovery of Nancy Guthrie. $1 million. And for the first time, Savannah acknowledged what everyone has been fearing. Her mother may already be gone. This is day 24 of the Nancy Guthrie case. And today we need to talk about the family's desperate plea, the massive reward they're offering, a major controversy about the surveillance footage, the DNA challenges that have investigators stuck, the volunteers who've joined the search from Mexico, and where this investigation stands after nearly 4 weeks with no answers and resources potentially being scaled back. Let me take you through everything that's happened in the last 24 hours, because this case just took a dramatic turn. This morning, February 24th, Savannah Guthrie broke her silence. She hadn't posted anything about her mother's case since February 15th. 9 days of silence. No updates, no pleas, no videos with her siblings, nothing. And people were starting to wonder why. The family had been so vocal in the first 2 weeks, posting videos almost daily, pleading with whoever took Nancy to make contact, saying they were willing to pay, and then suddenly, silence. Now we know why. The family was making a decision, a difficult, painful decision about how much they were willing to offer to bring Nancy home, or at least to find out where she is. In the video posted to Instagram this morning, Savannah spoke directly to the camera, alone, not with her siblings this time, just her, and her words were careful, measured, deliberate, but absolutely heartbreaking. She said, and I'm quoting directly, "She may already be gone, but we need to know where she is. We need her to come home. For that reason, we are offering a family reward of up to $1 million for any information that leads us to her recovery. $1 million. Let that sink in for a moment. That's not the FBI's reward. That's not from Crime Stoppers. That's not from an anonymous donor. That's from the Guthrie family themselves, out of their own pockets. Money they've earned. Money they're willing to give away just for information, just for answers. And notice the language Savannah used. Recovery. Not rescue, not safe return, recovery. That word choice is significant. It's deliberate. It's legal language, carefully chosen. Recovery can mean bringing someone home alive, but it can also mean finding remains, finding a body, knowing what happened, having closure. Being able to lay your mother to rest, Savannah continued, and her voice was steady, but you could hear the emotion underneath. So please, if you hear this message, if you've been waiting and you haven't been sure, let this be your sign to please come forward, tell what you know, and help us bring our beloved mom home so that we can either celebrate a glorious, miraculous homecoming or celebrate the beautiful, brave, and courageous and noble life that she has lived. Either celebrate a homecoming or celebrate her life. She's preparing for both possibilities. And that tells you everything about where the family's mindset is after 24 days. They're hoping for the best. They're praying for a miracle. But they're preparing for the worst. And they just need to know. They need that phone call. They need that tip. They need someone to come forward and tell them what happened to their mother. The $1 million family reward is in addition to the existing rewards that were already in place. The FBI announced on February 10th that they're offering up to $100,000 for information leading to Nancy's location or the arrest and conviction of anyone involved in her disappearance. That's standard for the FBI in high-profile abduction cases. They have the resources, they have the budget. $100,000 is significant, but it's not unusual. An 88 Crime, which is the Pima County and Tucson affiliate of the National Crime Stoppers organization, is offering up to $102,500 for information leading to an arrest in the case. That reward was put together from donations, from the community, from people in Tucson who want to help, who want answers, who are horrified by what happened to their neighbor. So when you add it all up, the total reward now stands at $1,202,500, over $1.2 million, for information that helps find Nancy Guthrie or identify who took her. Let me put that in perspective. That is one of the largest rewards in the history of missing persons cases in the United States. For comparison, when Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped in 2002, the reward reached about $250,000. When Jamie Kloss went missing in 2018, the reward was $50,000. When Molly Tibbetts disappeared, also in 2018, the reward eventually reached $400,000. $1 million from a single family is extraordinary. It's unprecedented in most cases. And it tells you how desperate the Guthrie family is, how much they need answers, how much they're willing to sacrifice financially just to know what happened to their mother. Savannah Guthrie is a successful journalist. She's the co-host of The Today Show, one of the most watched morning programs in America. She makes a very good living, but $1 million is still $1 million. That's life-changing money for most people. That's retirement money. That's college funds for grandchildren. That's security, and the family is willing to give it away. All of it, just for information. And the phrasing of Savannah's message was interesting. She said, "Please, if you've been waiting and you haven't been sure, let this be your sign to please come forward. If you've been waiting, if you haven't been sure." That specific phrasing suggests the family believes someone out there knows something. Maybe they saw something that night. Maybe they heard something. Maybe they know someone whose behavior has been strange since February 1st. Maybe they're scared to come forward because they're worried about getting involved. Maybe they think what they know isn't important enough. Maybe they're protecting someone. Maybe they're unsure if what they saw or heard actually matters, but the family is telling them directly, $1 million. This is your sign. Whatever you've been waiting for, whatever you've been unsure about, this is it. Come forward now. Tell us what you know. Help us bring Nancy home. The video ended with Savannah saying, "Help us bring our beloved mom home so that we can either celebrate a glorious, miraculous homecoming or celebrate the beautiful, brave, and courageous and noble life that she has lived." That phrase, the beautiful, brave, and courageous and noble life that she has lived, is past tense. Has lived. Not is living. Has lived. Like it's already over. Like they're already preparing for a funeral, for a memorial service, for saying goodbye. And that's the reality after 24 days. The likelihood of finding Nancy alive decreases with every day that passes. She's 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. She needs daily medication for high blood pressure and heart issues. She has limited mobility. Every day without that medication is dangerous. Every day in captivity, if she's still alive, is trauma. Physical and psychological trauma that an 84-year-old body might not survive. So the family is being realistic. They're being honest with themselves and with the public. Nancy may already be gone, but they need to know, and they're willing to pay $1.2 million for that knowledge. Now, while the family was silent this past week, there were major developments in the case. Developments that created significant controversy. Developments that had major news organizations reporting one thing and law enforcement saying another. And today, that conflict came to a head. On Monday, February 23rd, multiple major news organizations reported something significant. CNN was one of the first. They cited a source telling them that the masked person seen on Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera footage was actually at her door on 2 different days. Not just on the morning of February 1st when she disappeared. He'd been there before, on an earlier day, surveilling the house, planning. ABC News confirmed the same information independently with their own sources familiar with the investigation. CBS News also confirmed it with a law enforcement source. All 3 networks, all citing sources, all saying the same thing. The suspect was at Nancy's door at least twice. The evidence, according to these sources, was right there in the photos and videos that the FBI released on February 10th. If you look at the images carefully, there are clear differences. In most of the images and in the video footage, the suspect is wearing a backpack, a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. It's clearly visible on his back, but in one of the still images, he's not wearing a backpack at all. His back is visible. There's no backpack. And he doesn't appear to have the gun holster visible either in that particular image. Sources told CNN, ABC News, and CBS News that the image without the backpack was captured by Nancy's Nest doorbell camera on a day before the suspected abduction, a different day entirely, not February 1st, an earlier reconnaissance visit. And when you think about it, it makes sense. The theory, according to sources, goes like this. The suspect approached Nancy's door the first time, maybe during the day or early evening, just to check out the house. He noticed the Nest doorbell camera mounted right there by the front door, clearly visible, obviously recording. And he was scared off. He realized he was being filmed. He realized there was security. So he left, but he didn't give up. He didn't abandon the plan. Instead, he went away, he thought about it, he prepared, and he came back. The second time, on February 1st in the middle of the night, he came prepared. He knew about the camera, and that's why we see him in the video footage tampering with it, trying to knock it off with light taps, and when that doesn't work, covering the lens with foliage from a potted plant on Nancy's porch. He's trying to disable the camera because he knows it's there, because he saw it the first time. Former FBI agent Jason Pack spoke to ABC News about what this revelation would mean if it's true. And I'm quoting him directly. It could indicate that the person was there surveilling the place before the abduction happened. The fact that there was preparation and planning makes it more of a sophisticated type of criminal activity than someone just showing up. Surveillance, preparation, planning, sophisticated criminal activity. These are not the words you use to describe a random crime. A crime of opportunity. Someone who just happened to be in the neighborhood and saw an elderly woman and decided on impulse to break in. This is organized. This is methodical. This is someone who thinks ahead, who plans, who prepares, who adapts when something doesn't go according to plan. And when you look at the photos that the FBI released, the theory seems to make sense. The photos clearly showed the suspect dressed differently in different images, with a backpack in some, without in others, different lighting conditions, different positioning on the porch. It seemed obvious to many people analyzing the footage that they were from different times, maybe even different days. The FBI released those images on February 10th, and for almost 2 weeks, everyone assumed they were all from the same night, the night of February 1st. Just different moments as the suspect moved around the property. But these sources were now saying, no, that's not the case. One of those images is from an earlier visit, a reconnaissance mission. It made sense. It explained the differences in the photos. It explained why the suspect seemed to know exactly where the camera was and how to try to disable it. It explained the level of planning that seemed evident in the crime. But today, Sheriff Chris Nanos pushed back hard against these reports, and he was not subtle about it. In an interview with NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz that aired this morning on the Today Show, Sheriff Nanos was asked directly about the reports from CNN, ABC, and CBS, and his response was firm. He said the suggestion that the photos were taken on different days is, and I'm quoting, purely speculative. He said, "It is all speculative for someone to suggest that that photo is from a different day. We understand the thinking behind it, but again, I remind everybody we follow the rules of evidence." He continued, "We cannot tell you it's a different day. We don't know that. It's still under investigation." And then he made a point that's technically accurate but also interesting. He said, "We are aware that doorbell images released earlier in the investigation depict a suspect in different stages of attire, including with and without a backpack. There is no date or timestamp associated with these images. No date or timestamp. That's the key issue. When the FBI recovered these images from Nancy's Nest doorbell camera, they were recovered from what they called residual data located in back-end systems. Essentially, fragments of data that hadn't been fully deleted yet. But those fragments didn't include metadata like timestamps. So there's no digital record saying this photo was taken at 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, and this photo was taken at 3:00 p.m. on January 28th. The Pima County Sheriff's Department released an official statement that said, "There is no date or timestamp associated with these images. Therefore, any suggestion that the photographs were taken on different days is purely speculative." This remains an active and ongoing criminal investigation, and conclusions will be guided by verifiable evidence and established facts. They also added that the information suggesting multiple visits did not come from the FBI or PCSD, meaning law enforcement didn't leak this. The sources that CNN, ABC, and CBS cited were not official FBI or Sheriff's Department sources, at least according to the sheriff. So now we have a conflict. A direct conflict between major news organizations and law enforcement. CNN, ABC News, and CBS News all reported, citing sources familiar with the investigation, that the photos are from different days, that the suspect was at Nancy's door at least twice, that this was surveillance and planning. But the sheriff is saying that's speculative, that there's no way to prove it, that the images don't have timestamps, that investigators can't definitively say those photos are from different days. Who's right? I don't know. And honestly, I can see both sides. CNN, ABC, and CBS are credible news organizations. They don't just make things up, they cite sources. And when all three independently report the same thing, that carries weight. But Sheriff Nanos is also right that without timestamps, you can't definitively prove when those photos were taken. The differences in the images, the backpack versus no backpack, the different lighting, that could all be explained by the same night at different times. But here's what's interesting, and here's what makes me think there might be more to this story than the sheriff is letting on. Sheriff Nanos himself confirmed in the NBC interview that investigators have asked Nancy's neighbors for surveillance footage dating back to January 1st. That's a full month before Nancy disappeared. Why would they ask for footage going back a month if they didn't think the suspect might have been in the area before? If they were confident that this was a single night event, why not just ask for footage from January 31st and February 1st? Why go back an entire month? Sheriff Nanos explained, "The reason they're asking for footage that far back is because they're looking into the possibility that the suspect came to Guthrie's home before the night of her abduction." There it is. The sheriff himself is confirming that investigators believe the suspect may have been at or near Nancy's home before February 1st. They're investigating that possibility. They're collecting evidence to support or refute it, so even if the sheriff is disputing the specific claim that the FBI photos definitively show 2 different days, he's confirming the broader theory, that this was planned, that the suspect may have been there before, that this wasn't random, and that still means the same thing, regardless of whether the specific photos are from 1 day or 2. This wasn't a random crime. This was planned. This was surveilled. Someone targeted Nancy specifically, someone who knew where she lived. Someone who may have been watching her, studying her routine, preparing, waiting for the right moment. And that makes this so much more disturbing. Because random crimes, crimes of opportunity, those can happen to anyone. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Bad luck. But targeted crimes, planned abductions, those require something more. They require a reason, a motive, a connection, however tenuous. Why Nancy? Why an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility and health issues? Why her specifically? What made her a target? Was it because of her daughter's fame? Savannah Guthrie is one of the most recognizable journalists in America. Was this about money? About ransom? The family did receive purported ransom notes, though authorities haven't confirmed if they're authentic. Or was it something else entirely? Something we don't know about yet? Some connection between Nancy and the suspect that hasn't been discovered? Some reason why he chose her home, that specific night? We don't have answers to those questions. Not yet. But the fact that this appears to be planned, whether it was 2 visits or careful preparation based on 1 visit, tells us this wasn't random. And that's important. Let's talk about what investigators are actually doing right now while they wait for DNA results and while they try to identify the suspect. Because after 24 days, despite 400 investigators working this case, despite more than 19,000 tips coming into the FBI, despite over $1.2 million in rewards, authorities still don't have a name. No suspect identified. No person of interest publicly named. Sheriff Nanos told NBC News on February 23rd that his department has no names they're currently investigating. None. After all this time, all these resources, all these tips, all this media attention, they don't have a single name of someone they're actively looking at as a suspect. That's remarkable. And it's frustrating. And it tells you just how careful this person was. What they do have is DNA, but it's complicated DNA. Mixed DNA from Nancy's home that contains genetic material from multiple people all blended together in the same sample. The lab in Florida that's testing these samples has hit what Sheriff Nanos called a snag. The samples are difficult to separate. One person's DNA might be heavily dominant over another's. It's like trying to separate salt from sugar after they've been mixed together. Technically possible, but extremely difficult and time-consuming. The timeline for results could be weeks, Sheriff Nanos said, or months, or in the worst-case scenario, maybe even a year. A year. Imagine being Nancy's family and hearing that. Imagine being told you might have to wait a year for DNA results that could identify who took your mother. But there is some hope, and it comes from a relatively new field of forensic science that's been making headlines lately because it's solved several high-profile cases that seemed unsolvable. Cece Moore is the chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs. She's one of the leading experts in the field of investigative genetic genealogy. She's worked on hundreds of cases. She's helped identify suspects in murders that went unsolved for decades. She's helped give families closure. And she spoke to Fox News about the Nancy Guthrie case. She explained that even though the partial DNA profile from Nancy's home isn't good enough for CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database, which requires an almost perfect profile, it might still be usable for a different kind of analysis. She said, and I'm quoting, "It is possible to deconvolute a mixed sample and get a profile, but it's really hard to get a profile into CODIS. It has to be practically perfect. CODIS is the gold standard for DNA matching in criminal investigations. It contains profiles from more than 19 million known offenders nationally. You get a DNA sample from a crime scene, you create a profile that meets very strict quality standards, you run it through CODIS, and if the person's DNA is in the database, you get a match. It's how thousands of cases have been solved, but it requires high-quality DNA. Almost perfect. And mixed DNA rarely meets that standard. But Moore also said this: you could absolutely use that same sample to create a SNP profile. SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. It's a different type of genetic marker than what CODIS uses. And forensic genetic genealogy uses SNP profiles instead of the STR profiles that CODIS requires. They're looking at different parts of the DNA, essentially. Different markers, different data points. And here's the important part. SNP profiles don't have to be as perfect as CODIS profiles. They can work with lower quality DNA. They can work with degraded DNA. They can even work to some extent with mixed DNA, though it's still challenging. Moore said, "We've had success with a lot of cases with mixtures. So what does that mean practically? It means that even though investigators can't run the DNA through CODIS to look for a direct match with a known offender, they might still be able to use it for investigative genetic genealogy. And that's how some of the most famous cold cases in recent years have been solved. The Golden State Killer, Joseph James DeAngelo. He committed at least 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries across California from 1974 to 1986. For decades, he was a ghost. DNA from the crime scenes didn't match anyone in CODIS, but in 2018, investigators used genetic genealogy. They took DNA from a crime scene, created a genetic profile, uploaded it to GEDmatch, a public genealogy database where people upload their DNA results from companies like Ancestry and 23andMe. The DNA didn't match DeAngelo directly. He'd never taken a DNA test, but it matched distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins. Genetic genealogists then built family trees going back generations, narrowed down potential suspects based on age and location, and eventually identified DeAngelo. They arrested him. He confessed. He's now serving multiple life sentences. The Idaho College murders. 4 University of Idaho students were stabbed to death in their off-campus home in November 2022. Brian Kohberger was identified as a suspect just 6 weeks later using genetic genealogy. DNA found at the crime scene didn't match anything in CODIS, so they used genealogy databases, found relatives, built family trees, and traced it to Kohberger. He's currently awaiting trial. The Gilgo Beach serial killer. Rex Heuermann was arrested in July 2023 for murders that occurred more than a decade earlier. His DNA was recovered from a pizza crust he'd thrown away, matched to DNA from the crime scenes, and investigators used genetic genealogy to narrow him down as a suspect through relatives' DNA in public databases. So the technique works. It works incredibly well. It's revolutionized cold case investigations, but it takes time. Building family trees from genetic matches can take weeks or even months, depending on how close the relatives are in the database and how much genealogical information is publicly available. You need birth records, death records, marriage records, census data. You're essentially doing detective work through genetics and genealogy combined. And there's another complication specific to Nancy's case. The mixed DNA makes everything harder, even for genetic genealogy. If the partial profile from Nancy's home is too mixed, if there's too much of Nancy's DNA or too much of another person's DNA contaminating the suspect's DNA, it might not be usable even for genealogy purposes. You need a clean enough sample to create that SNP profile. And with mixed DNA, especially when one person's DNA is heavily dominant, separating it out can be almost impossible with current technology. But Moore was optimistic. She told Fox News, "We've had success with a lot of cases with mixtures. Mixed DNA samples are actually common at crime scenes. People live in homes with family members. They have visitors. They have cleaning services. There's DNA everywhere in a normal household. And genetic genealogists have gotten very good at working with imperfect samples." Barbara Ray Venter is another genetic genealogy expert. She helped solve the Golden State Killer case. She's a legend in the field. And she spoke to NBC News last week about the Nancy Guthrie investigation. She talked about the challenges of mixed DNA and the limitations of genealogy databases, but she was also hopeful. She said, "Back when we did the Golden State Killer, there were virtually no tools to analyze the match information that you were getting, and now there's just all kinds of really sophisticated tools to do that. The technology is improving rapidly. What seemed impossible 5 years ago is routine now. Labs can work with much smaller amounts of DNA than they could before. She said, "Back when we were doing that, you needed typically around 200 nanograms of DNA. Now, I actually did a case with, I think we had 25 picograms, so it was basically 1,000-fold less DNA. That's incredible progress. And it gives hope that even if the DNA from Nancy's home is challenging, there might be a way forward. But it takes time. And meanwhile, Nancy has been gone for 24 days. Her medication has been gone for 24 days. If she's still alive, she's suffering. And the family is in agony not knowing. They also have physical evidence besides DNA. There's the glove. On February 11th, about 10 days after Nancy disappeared, investigators found a black glove roughly 2 miles from her home in a field near a roadside. The glove appeared to match the gloves worn by the suspect in the doorbell camera footage. Same style, same color. And everyone thought this was going to be the break in the case. The suspect wore those gloves. His hands were inside them. His DNA would be all over the inside. They'd run it through CODIS, get a match, identify him within days. Case solved. But that's not what happened. Last week, authorities announced that the DNA from the glove does not match any entries in CODIS. No match at all. Which means the suspect's DNA, assuming this is even his glove, isn't in the FBI's national database. Now that's actually not surprising. Most people's DNA isn't in CODIS. CODIS contains DNA from people who've been arrested for serious crimes and had their DNA collected as part of that arrest. Violent offenders, sex offenders, some burglars, some drug dealers, depending on the state. But not everyone who commits a crime ends up in CODIS, not even close. From Arizona alone, there are more than 434,000 offender profiles in CODIS, according to the FBI. Nationally, there are 19 million. That sounds like a lot, but there are 330 million people in the United States, so CODIS contains DNA from less than 6% of the population. If the suspect has never been arrested for a serious crime before, or if he was arrested but his DNA was never collected because it was before DNA collection became standard practice, or if it was for a crime that doesn't require DNA collection in his state, he wouldn't be in CODIS. So finding no match in CODIS doesn't mean the glove is useless. It just means this particular suspect hasn't been caught before. At least not for anything serious enough to get his DNA into the database. But here's the bigger problem with the glove. The DNA on it also doesn't match the DNA found inside Nancy's home. And that's strange. If the same person who took Nancy wore the glove, you'd expect the DNA on the glove to match the DNA in the house, right? Same person, same DNA. So why don't they match? There are a few possibilities. Maybe the glove isn't actually from the suspect. Maybe it's just a random glove that someone else lost in that area weeks or months earlier, and it just happens to look similar to the gloves in the video. Black gloves are common. People lose them all the time. Or maybe there's contamination. Maybe someone else handled the glove after the suspect discarded it. Maybe it was sitting outside for days and other people's DNA got on it. DNA from animals, DNA from plants, environmental contamination. That can make DNA analysis difficult or impossible. Or maybe it's not the suspect's glove at all, and it's just a coincidence that it was found in the general area where he might have fled, and it looks vaguely similar to the gloves in the footage. Sheriff Nanos told CNN that investigators have collected about 16 gloves total from the area around Nancy's home during their searches. 16. Because people lose gloves constantly. They drop them. They throw them away. They leave them in parking lots. They fall out of pockets. So the fact that one black glove was found 2 miles from Nancy's house doesn't necessarily mean it's connected to her case. It might just be one of the many gloves that people lose every day in every city. All 16 of those gloves are being analyzed. They're checking the DNA on all of them, because maybe, just maybe, one of them will turn out to be the right glove, the one the suspect actually wore. But so far, nothing has panned out. And then there's the backpack that volunteer searchers found over the weekend. There was a moment of hope when they discovered a backpack in a culvert not far from Nancy's home. Could this be it? Could this be the Ozark Trail backpack that the suspect was wearing in the doorbell camera footage? The backpack that's sold exclusively at Walmart? The backpack that investigators called one of the most promising leads in the case? On Monday morning, the Pima County Sheriff's Department quickly put out a statement. After reviewing the bag and its contents, it does not appear to be a viable lead for the investigation. 3 reasons why. First, it's not even the right brand. The suspect was carrying an Ozark Trail backpack. The backpack volunteers found wasn't Ozark Trail. Wrong brand entirely. Strike 1. Second, it appears to have been outside for much longer than 3 weeks. It was weathered, damaged. The material was degraded in a way that suggested it had been sitting in that culvert for months, possibly years, not since January 31st when Nancy was taken. Strike two. And third, inside the backpack, investigators found a piece of identification belonging to a minor, a child's ID. This wasn't the suspect's backpack. This was just a random backpack that some kid had lost or thrown away months ago, maybe even years ago, completely unrelated to Nancy's case. Strike three. So that lead went nowhere too. Another false alarm, another dead end, another moment of hope that turned into disappointment. But that's how investigations work sometimes. Most of the time, actually. You check every lead. You examine every piece of potential evidence. You run down every tip, and 99% of it turns out to be nothing. But you have to check every single one, because the one time you don't check is the one time it might have been the real thing, the one piece of evidence that solves the case. The search for Nancy has drawn volunteers from unexpected places. And this is one of the most powerful parts of this story, because it shows you how tragedy can bring people together across borders, across languages, across cultures. This week, members of a Mexican volunteer search group called Madres Buscadoras de Sonora joined the effort to find Nancy. The name translates to Searching Mothers of Sonora. Sonora is a state in northern Mexico, just across the border from Arizona. These are mothers who've been searching for their own missing children in Mexico for the past decade. It's a heartbreaking reality in parts of Mexico where cartel violence and disappearances are tragically common. When someone goes missing in areas controlled by cartels, law enforcement is often unable or unwilling to search. The cartels have too much power. The police are too scared. The government doesn't have the resources or, in some cases, the will. So these mothers decided to search themselves. They organized, they trained, they taught themselves how to use ground-penetrating radar. They learned how to read soil. They learned the signs of disturbed ground. They learned how to identify shallow graves. They learned from forensic experts who volunteered their time to train them, and they've become incredibly good at it. Over the past 10 years, these mothers have found the remains of more than 5,000 people in Mexico. 5,000. Think about that number. 5,000 missing people found because their mothers refused to give up, because they went out with shovels and determination and love and searched. Most of them are still searching for their own children. Most of them haven't found their sons or daughters yet, but they keep searching, and they help other families along the way because they know the pain. They know what it's like to wake up every single day not knowing where your child is, not knowing if they're alive or dead, not knowing if you'll ever have answers. Lupita Tello is a member of Madres Buscadoras de Sonora. Her own son disappeared in Mexico in 2020. She's been searching for him for almost 5 years now. And when she heard about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance just across the border in Tucson, she didn't hesitate. She contacted other members of her group, and they decided to help. Tello told reporters on Monday that she and 2 other volunteers are in Tucson, posting flyers on bus stops and utility poles near Nancy's home. They're making their presence known in the community. They're showing Nancy's face to as many people as possible, because sometimes someone has seen something and doesn't realize it's important. Sometimes a flyer triggers a memory, a detail, a connection. They're also planning to do the same in Nogales, Mexico, which is just across the border from Arizona, only about 60 miles south of Tucson. Because it's possible, though no one wants to say it out loud, that Nancy could have been taken across the border, that she could be in Mexico. And if that's the case, these mothers know how to search there. They know the terrain. They know the risks. They know how to navigate areas where outsiders wouldn't be safe. Tello said this, and I think it's one of the most powerful quotes in this entire case. We know the soil. We know when someone has dug deep, or when there is a shallow grave. We hope we can help because we understand the pain of having a missing relative. We know the soil. That's not something you learn in a classroom. That's knowledge earned through years of heartbreak, years of digging, years of searching for your own child while finding other people's children, other people's mothers, other people's sisters. The Pima County Sheriff's Department had previously asked volunteer search groups to stay away from the area. They posted on social media over the weekend. We appreciate their concern, and we all want to find Nancy, but this work is best left to professionals. And I understand why they'd say that. Untrained volunteers can contaminate crime scenes. They can destroy evidence. They can get hurt in dangerous terrain. They can overwhelm investigators who are trying to do systematic, methodical work. But these mothers from Madres Buscadoras de Sonora aren't untrained volunteers. They're not well-meaning but clueless civilians. They're experts in their own right. They've done this work for years. They found thousands of missing people when professional law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't. They've worked with Mexican forensic experts. They've developed techniques and protocols. They know what they're doing, and they're bringing a level of dedication and expertise that's hard to match. Because they're not doing this for a paycheck. They're not doing this because it's their job. They're doing this because they know exactly what Nancy's family is going through. They've lived it. They're still living it. Some of them are still searching for their own children after years or even decades. And they're offering their help to a family in another country because they know that pain. They know what it's like to wake up every day and wonder if today will be the day you finally get answers. They know what it's like to search and search and search and find nothing. They know what it's like to refuse to give up, even when everyone else tells you it's hopeless. It's a powerful reminder that this case isn't just about law enforcement and investigations and DNA analysis and surveillance footage. It's about a family in pain. It's about a mother who's missing. It's about children who want their mom back. It's about a community that refuses to give up hope, even as the official investigation starts to scale back. And that brings us to the difficult reality that's been reported, but that people don't want to talk about. Last Friday, February 21st, sources with knowledge of the case told ABC News something concerning. The lack of recent progress in the investigation may mean that investigators will soon have to scale back their resources. Right now, there are 400 investigators working this case around the clock. 400. That's an enormous commitment of personnel and resources. The FBI has agents dedicated to this. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has deputies dedicated to this. Other local, state, and federal agencies have contributed personnel. 400 people, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for nearly 4 weeks now. But that's not sustainable indefinitely. Police departments have budgets. They have other cases. They have other crimes being committed, other victims who need help, other investigations that need attention. You can surge resources for a major case, but you can't keep that surge going forever if leads aren't panning out. According to the sources who spoke to ABC News, nearly 3 weeks after Nancy vanished, investigators are finding their best leads are so far coming up empty. The partial DNA from Nancy's home is unidentified and might take weeks or months or longer to analyze. Technology companies and the FBI have been unable to recover any additional video footage from Nancy's home security system beyond what's already been released. Investigators have been unable to associate any vehicle with her abduction. No car, no truck, nothing. The glove DNA doesn't match CODIS and doesn't match the home DNA. The backpack turned out to be unrelated. The 19,000 tips that have come in are mostly theories and opinions, not credible leads with actual evidence. The sources told ABC News that given the seemingly sluggish progress, investigators believe the case would soon have to move into a new phase. A phase with fewer dedicated resources. A transition from the current massive emergency response to a smaller task force focused on the case long term. And here's the part that's hardest to hear. The Guthrie family has been briefed on this possibility. They know. They've been told that the investigation might need to be transitioned. They've been told that certain leads have not been panning out. They know that the 400 investigators working around the clock might be reduced to a team of 20 or 30 working the case alongside other assignments. And maybe that's part of why they announced the $1 million reward this morning. Because they know time is running out. They know the massive search effort can't last forever. They know that if they don't get answers soon, the case could go cold. Really cold. And they're trying to prevent that. They're trying to generate new leads. They're trying to give people a financial incentive to come forward before the investigation scales back and the media attention fades and Nancy becomes just another missing person case in a file somewhere. The Pima County Sheriff's Department released a statement over the weekend that ended with this line: "This will remain an active investigation until Nancy Guthrie is found, or all leads are exhausted. Until she's found, or all leads are exhausted." That's the commitment. But it also acknowledges the possibility that all leads could be exhausted, that they could run out of things to investigate, that the trail could go completely cold. And that's what the family is fighting against with this $1 million reward. They're fighting against time. They're fighting against the possibility that their mother's case becomes another cold case, another unsolved disappearance, another family that never gets answers. So where are we on day 24 of the Nancy Guthrie case? We have a family offering over $1 million total in rewards, desperate for any information that could help them find their mother or at least know what happened to her. We have a daughter, Savannah, who's acknowledged on camera that her mother may already be gone, but who just needs to know where she is, who needs closure, who needs to be able to either celebrate a homecoming or celebrate her mother's life. We have a major controversy over whether the suspect visited Nancy's home twice or if that reporting was speculative. But regardless of who's right in that dispute, we know that investigators are looking into the possibility of prior visits. We know they've asked for surveillance footage going back a month. We know this appears to be planned, not random. We have DNA that's challenging to process, mixed DNA that might not be good enough for CODIS, but might be usable for genetic genealogy. DNA that could identify the suspect, but might take weeks or months or longer to analyze. And even then, there's no guarantee it will work. We have a glove that was found 2 miles away that looked promising, but didn't match CODIS and didn't match the home DNA. We have a backpack that was found by volunteers, but turned out to be the wrong brand, too old, and containing a child's ID. We have 16 gloves total that have been collected and are being analyzed. We have 400 investigators who may soon have to scale back their efforts, who may have to reduce to a smaller team, who may have to accept that this case is going to take much longer to solve than anyone hoped. We have 19,000 tips that have been called in, most of which aren't useful. Most of which are theories and opinions and speculation, not actual evidence or credible information. We have surveillance footage showing a masked man, but no identification of who he is. We have a unique gun holster that firearms experts say looks amateurish, but no one has come forward to say they recognize it or sold it. We have an Ozark Trail backpack sold exclusively at Walmart, and investigators are reviewing purchase records and surveillance footage from Walmart stores, but so far, no breakthrough. We have volunteers from Mexico, mothers who've spent years searching for their own missing children, offering their expertise to help find Nancy. We have a community that's still posting flyers, still searching the desert, still hoping. And we have an 84-year-old woman who's been missing for 24 days, who has a pacemaker that disconnected at 2:30 a.m. on February 1st. Who needs daily medication that she hasn't had for 24 days? Who had blood on her porch that's been confirmed to be hers? Who was likely taken against her will by someone who planned it carefully, someone who's proven incredibly difficult to identify. The surveillance footage, whether it's from 1 day or 2, tells us something important. It tells us this person knew where Nancy lived. This person approached her door wearing a mask and gloves and carrying a weapon. This person tried to disable her camera. This person was methodical, careful, but not perfect. Because nobody's perfect. Nobody can plan everything. Nobody can eliminate every trace of their presence. Somewhere in all this evidence, somewhere in all this footage, somewhere in all this DNA, there's a mistake. There has to be. A fingerprint, a fiber, a trace, something. And maybe that $1 million reward announced this morning will be what finally brings that mistake to light. Maybe someone who's been holding back will see that number and realize they need to come forward. Maybe someone who thought what they knew wasn't important will realize it might be worth $1 million. Maybe someone who was scared will decide the money is worth the risk. Or maybe the DNA will eventually yield results. Maybe the genetic genealogy will work. Maybe the lab in Florida will separate those mixed samples. Maybe they'll create a usable SNP profile. Maybe they'll find relatives in the databases. Maybe genetic genealogists will build the family trees. Maybe the suspect will be identified. Maybe Nancy will be found. But the clock is ticking. 24 days and counting. Resources are being reduced. The massive search effort is transitioning to a long-term investigation. Leads are running out. And a family is offering everything they have, including $1 million of their own money, just for answers. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, the FBI is asking you to call 1-800-CALL-FBI. That's 1-800-225-5324. You can also call the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. Or you can submit tips online at tips.fbi.gov. And now, with the family's $1 million reward plus the existing FBI and Crime Stoppers rewards, there's over $1.2 million waiting for information that helps solve this case. That's life-changing money. That's generational wealth for many families. And it's there for anyone who comes forward with credible information that leads to Nancy's recovery or the identification and arrest of whoever took her. Please, if you know something, if you saw something, if you heard something, this is your sign. The family needs you. Nancy needs to be found. Her family deserves answers. And over $1 million is waiting for the information that makes that happen. This is day 24 of the Nancy Guthrie case. A family has offered $1 million. A daughter has acknowledged her mother may be gone. An investigation is hitting roadblocks and may soon scale back. Volunteers from Mexico who know the pain of missing loved ones have joined the search, and time is running out. Somewhere out there, someone knows something. Someone saw this man. Someone recognizes the way he walks in that surveillance video. Someone recognizes that unique gun holster. Someone sold him that Ozark Trail backpack. Someone knows where he lives. Someone has noticed strange behavior since February 1st. Someone has information that could change everything for $1.2 million. Or just because it's the right thing to do. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She's a mother, a grandmother, a friend. She was taken from her home on January 31st. She has a pacemaker. She needs daily medication. Every day that passes is another day she's been without that medication. Another day her family has lived in agony, not knowing where she is, not knowing if she's alive, not knowing if they'll ever see her again. But every day that passes is also another day that investigators are working, another day of DNA analysis, another day of new tips coming in, another day of technology improving, another day of genetic genealogists building family trees, another day of volunteers searching the desert, another day of the community refusing to give up, another day closer to a breakthrough, we hope. The suspect thought he was being careful. He wore a mask, he wore gloves, he tried to disable the camera. He planned this out, but careful criminals still make mistakes. And somewhere in all the evidence that's been collected, in all the footage that's been analyzed, in all the DNA that's being tested, there's the mistake that's going to lead investigators to him. We just have to find it. Before time runs out, before resources are scaled back, before the investigation goes cold, before hope fades, Nancy Guthrie deserves to be found. Her family deserves answers, and someone out there can provide them. If that's you, please make the call. Please come forward. Please help bring Nancy home.